Hey everybody, we're going to learn about circles lesson number 5. We're going to talk about how to graph a circle. Now, if you have a fancy graphing calculator, it's actually not going to be very good at graphing circles. I actually think the Desmos app is better. Or if you just go to the website desmos.com, I think it is far better. And the main reason is on a traditional graphing calculator, the equations that we are going to graph do not graph as is. You have to move them around and solve for y, and it gets really, really ugly. Now, the great thing about this lesson, we are going to do some things that are going to look horrific. They are going to look incredibly difficult, and the people in your life who are watching you are going to say, man, you must have been working all day at that. Turns out it only takes about 5 minutes to learn how to graph a circle. So I just want to throw that out there because, again, you're going to look like a genius today, even though you didn't really do that much work at all. Okay, so I just want to throw this at you right here, this first example, the shortest, simplest example I can think of. X squared plus y squared equals 25. Now, x squared plus y squared equals 25, that's an intimidating looking graph until you realize what we have to do with it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to Desmos, and I'm going to type in x squared plus y squared equals 25. Okay. You know, it looks like such an intimidating equation, and then you realize, wait a second, it's a circle. Not only that, what is the radius of the circle? You start counting, you're like, well, the radius is 5. And then you realize, well, I had a 25 right here. I wonder if that had something to do with it. Sure enough, it does. Let's go back to our drawing and let's sketch one for ourselves. Whenever you see an equation that just says x squared plus y squared equals a number, if you have a number like 25, that means the radius of your circle is 5. So all you have to do is go to 5. Go 5 up, 5 down, 5 left and right, and make a circle. And this is going to be where it gets really iffy for you. I can do it because I am in the Paint program, but it's going to start getting very iffy for you how to draw it. Some of yours will look like ovals. Some of yours will look not really round at all, but that's okay. This is a learning experience. You're going to do the best that you can. Okay, we're working on how we can figure out how these things work. Okay, we're just practicing. We're just trying to get better every day. Okay, so that is the most basic example of a circle that I can think of. X squared plus y squared equals 25. It creates a circle with a radius of 5 that starts in the middle. So now let's talk about two things. Number one, how can we change the size of the circle? Well, that's going to involve changing that last number. So now instead of 25, let's just do 9. So if you can pick up on what's going on here, if you have a 25 at the end, that means the radius is going to be 5. If you have a 9 at the end, it means the radius is going to be, well, let's find out. 3. So in case you can't tell, it has a lot to do with just whatever the square root of that last number is. So this time around, we're going to make another circle, but this time the radius is going to be 3. So go up 3, down 3, left 3, right 3. Do the best that you can on your sketch. So that's sort of the answer to question number 1. Question number 1 is, how can we make our circle bigger or smaller? And the answer is by changing that last number. And by the way, it's not always going to be a perfect square. If you want the radius of your circle to be 5.32, well, then whatever 5.32 squared is, that is what would go as that last number. So question number 1, how do you make it bigger and smaller? Well, the key is that last number. But question number 2, how do I move my circle around? And that's when we start throwing in parentheses. So what I want you to do, write this down on your paper, or just sketch it out somewhere else. And we're going to do this one. We're going to do that. There you go. And if you're not sure how to graph that, it's not a big deal. I'm going to have Desmos do it, and then you are going to pick up the pattern. Okay? Well, that's weird. So it wasn't around the center. So then where was the actual center of this circle? We were expecting it to be around the origin, but then it looks like it got picked up. It looks like it moved to the left and it moved down. So if we look at our picture, it looks to me like the new center of the circle was actually -2, -1. Okay, so let's go back into our note sheet and let's just remind ourselves that the center was -2, -1. So now I want you to draw that point. Now, if you're not sure how big to make it, if we go back to our Desmos file, it looks to me like the radius was 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means from our center, we are going to go 4 left, 4 up, 4 right, 4 down, the whole thing. Okay, because we're going to go 4 to the left, we're going to go 4 up, we're going to go 4 to the right, we're going to go 4 down. Every direction by 4. Because our circle had a radius of 4. And I knew that not only because I counted, but because 4 squared is 16. And that's where that 16 becomes relevant. Okay. So did we pick up the pattern here? Our equation initially had x plus 2, but then the x value of our center was actually -2. Our equation initially had y plus 1, but then the center of our circle turned out to have a y value of -1. So I wonder if it's just an opposite game. I wonder if we can just start thinking in terms of opposites to get what we need. Why don't we try that out? On these next 3, what I want you to do, let's not use Desmos and let's try to actually work our way through them. So let's make this up as we go. We'll go x plus 3 squared plus, but then now we're going to go y minus 4 squared equals, and I don't want too big of a circle here, so I'm just going to say 9 again. So if our pattern is true, then that means the center of this thing is going to be the opposite of what we had next to the letter x, and then the opposite of what we had next to the letter y. So let's try that out. Let's put the center of our circle at -3, 4. And then since this number is whatever my radius is going to be squared, r squared is 9, that means I want to go 3 up, 3 down, 3 left, 3 right. So my result should be something that looks like that. Okay. Pause it if you need a second, and then we're going to try it out in Desmos and make sure that we got what we needed. What do you think? I think we nailed it. So let's go here. Let's look at our answer right up here. It looks to me like we got exactly what we were looking for. All right, let's try a couple more here. We're just going to make this up as we go along. Okay. So let's see. It looks to me like if we're going to play our opposite game, then that means the center of our circle is -1, 5. And then the radius of our circle is 2. Because again, 2 squared is what you would need to get to 4. So I'm going to go to negative 1, 5. And then I am going to draw a circle with a radius of 2. That means I'm going to go 2 up, 2 down, 2 left, 2 right. And it's going to look something like that. Then we're going to double check our work on Desmos and make sure we know what we are doing. So remember, our equation was x plus 1 and then y minus 5. And then we're giving it a radius of 4. So the center was at negative 1, positive 5. The radius was 2. And I think we checked out pretty good. All right, last one. Now I'm going to mess with you a little bit. I'm going to see how we handle this. So this last example, I like this. This is going to be a little bit mean. See how you handle it. 13. All right, there you go. Now, we pretty much remember our shortcut here. We know that the center is going to be at 3, negative 3. The radius is whatever number squared would give me 13. Uh-oh. We had it going for a while. 3 squared is 9. 2 squared is 4. 5 squared is 25, 4 squared is 16. We had it going for a while, and then suddenly now we get a 13. What in the world? Well, what number squared would be 13? Well, if we know that r squared equals 13, then that means r would equal whatever the square root of 13 would be. Now, if you don't know the square root of 13, I mean, that doesn't really help you much. Maybe we'll grab a calculator and we'll just do 13, take the square root of that, and you get 3.6. Okay, about 3.6. Remember, we're just sketching. It's not going to be perfect. So all you really have to do is do your best to draw a circle that has a radius of about 3.6. So that means I want you to go a little more than 3.5 up, and a little more than 3.5 down, and a little more than 3.5 to the left and to the right. It's fine. It's not going to be exact. It doesn't have to be. I didn't need it to be. You're just going to do the best you can to do your best sketch. I don't know if that was intimidating or not, but that's the way it's going to go. The equation of a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. We already knew that radius trick. The center of your circle is hk. I'm not totally sure where those come from, but they're used all the time in the math universe, so get used to it. And obviously, we know that r is the radius. So that's kind of our pattern. It's an opposite game. That's where the minus signs come in. It's an opposite game. You need to make sure that if you see a plus 5 next to the x, you're going to put the center of the circle at negative 5 on the x-axis. You always have to play it as an opposite game. So for instance, if you had to write the equation of a circle and you knew that the center was 3, 5, you would use negative 3 next to your x, and you would use negative 5 next to your y. Now, according to the formula, the radius is 7. The formula says r squared, so we're going to have to square that number, and you would get 49. So again, the opposite of this number goes here, the opposite of this number goes here, and this number just needs to be squared. So when I told you before that this is a really intimidating looking lesson and then it turns out it goes really smoothly, not only that, you can just mess around on Desmos. If you ever wonder what's going on, and you're not sure and you want to just mess around on Desmos, you could do x plus 10 squared plus y minus 15 squared equals 144. There you go. You can experiment and you can teach yourself. This would have a center of negative 10 and positive 15, and it would have a radius of 12 because that was 144. You can teach yourself. All right, now, sometimes it's a little bit tougher. Like, for instance, over here, instead of giving you the radius, you need to use a point. Now, the best way to figure out what's going on here, remember, we have 2/3 of the information that we need. They gave us the center already, so we could just say x minus 0 squared. By the way, please don't ever do that. If the center is 0, 0, just say x squared plus y squared. Okay. Really, we have 2/3 of the information we need. The only thing we need is the radius. So how can we figure out what the radius is? Well, I want you to visualize it. If you have a center of a circle at 0, 0, and then there is another point on the circle at 6, 8, remember, so we have 0, 0. I'll make a point right here. That'll be the center. Just think of this like a regular coordinate plane, and then go to the point 6, 8 right here. The radius would just be whatever the distance is from the center to a point. Any point, it doesn't matter. If you were to take that line and you were to swing it around, no matter where it is on the circle, that should give you the radius, right? That's really what's going on here. So all we really have to do is figure out the length of that line, and that line is our radius. Okay? Another way of looking at it here, if you have a point 68, don't draw this, I'm just trying to give you a little demo here. Isn't that the center? Isn't that the circle that we're talking about? That's really what's going on here. Basically, all you have to do is figure out that line, because no matter where that line goes, feels like we're moving time, but it's moving backwards here. That line is the radius no matter where you put it. So I don't really even need to draw the circle. All I need to do is figure out how long that line is, and as soon as I figure that out, I've got the answer to my question. The good news is, if you go from 0, 0 to 6, 8, you could really just sketch out a right triangle, and you could just say that this is 6 because you went from 0 to 6, and this is 8 because you went from 0 to 8, and now you could just use the Pythagorean theorem, which, by the way, has a lot to do with the formula of a circle in general, but I don't want to get into those heavy details. I don't know if I can get into it in 20 minutes or less. Anyway, 6 squared plus 8 squared equals c squared. Now, 6 squared plus 8 squared is 100. So 100 equals c squared. Now, normally we do the square root, right? But in the formula, it says r squared. So the radius is going to be 10. The square root of 100 is 10. But the number that we put in the formula stays 100. Okay, so again, let me emphasize that one more time. The radius is going to be 10 because the square root of 100 is 10. But when you're writing the equation of a circle, you don't have to do the square root. You just leave the number as it is. Okay? Let's try that logic one more time here on the third problem. So again, you're talking about a circle that has a center of 3, 5, and then a point -2, -7. Your goal is to figure out how long the radius would be, because the radius just goes from the center to a point. Now that's going to be a pretty large radius here. If you had to figure it out, you could just sketch out a right triangle and count how far apart your x's are. From 3 to -2, that's a distance of 5. And how far apart your y's are. From 5 to -7, that would be a distance of 12. And now you could just do 5 squared plus 12 squared equals c squared. And then that means 169 is c squared. Now, normally, you would have to do the square root, and you'd find out that the radius is 13. But again, when we're writing an equation, that doesn't matter. When you're writing an equation, all you need to do is play the opposite game with the x, play the opposite game with the y, and then leave that squared number as it is. Okay, that's all you got to do. Okay, let's practice that one last time. From -3 to 8, that's a distance of 11. So the x's are changing by 11. Okay, from -1 to +5 is 6. So those are 6 apart. Okay. And then last but not least, 11 squared plus 6 squared equals c squared. Now let's get to writing the answer. The opposite of -3 is +3, so I'm going to write x plus 3 squared plus, and then we're going to go y plus 1 squared. I'm going to have to make the box bigger here. That's okay. And now let's talk about what this actually means. When you do 11 squared plus 6 squared, you're going to get 121 plus 36, which is 157. Now, normally, you have to take the square root of that number to find the radius. If you did take the square root of that number, you'd find out that the radius is about 12.5. But remember, when it comes time to write the equation of a circle, you don't actually need to do the square root because the formula has r squared already in it. So even though the radius, to figure out what the size of the radius is, you would have to do the square root of 157. We don't actually have to do that because we already know that in the formula, it's going to just be r squared, so we can just leave that number there. All right, so that's pretty much everything I can tell you about graphing a circle in 22 minutes. I know we went over a couple, I apologize, but I do hope this really helps you out. Hope you have a great day. Take care of yourself and take care of each other.